Hey, well, welcome. Hopefully, everybody's safely digging themselves out, right? Not getting too cold. Everybody doing all right out there?
Yeah, I'm okay. There's still a lot of snow on the roads, and
Okay.
when they're shoveling, they're just pushing the snow against the cars. So we got to keep digging ourselves out.
Yep, I had to dig up my driveway twice already. Hopefully they're done. Hopefully they're done. I think it was a good sign that we got a message from the college president about the start of the semester. So that is hopeful that we're actually going to start our semester officially and be on campus. Uh, Again, no word yet. So we will pay attention, right? We'll kind of keep checking things. Anybody know how many messages I've sent you since last Monday?
I don't know the number, but I know there's a lot.
A lot. There's a lot. It's at least 10. That's always a good answer. I have actually had weekends where it has been 10. That was my personal best. But I know I think we're at 5 because I just did one right before class. And I'm going to reiterate that message. I usually don't. That's why I send those messages. But I want to make sure that you hear it. And again, since we're recording this, folks who are watching this later, you guys are awesome. By the way, 100% of you turned in the developmental practice one. That has, I can tell you, never happened before. So you should pat yourselves on the back and be very proud of yourselves, um, and be sure to keep it up. Right? Like I said, it's a good sign that we started off up here, but now you've got a level to maintain. So yes, round of applause for everybody. Um, it makes my life easier. It makes your life easier. You're all like I said, moving forward, doing what you're supposed to do. Um, and you did pretty well on those. A lot of you were able to knock the rust off of any algebra skills, right? There were a few types of questions that were a little challenging, but those are all they were all minor things. There wasn't really anything major that kind of jumped out. The only weakness, if I had to pick a weakness, was calculator skills. But again, that's what we're going to work on right now. So that gave me a good baseline to see where things need to improve and where we need to focus on, what keystrokes, for example, are especially troublesome. So that's where we're going to start today. So if you've got your calculator, make sure you've got it ready to go. So before we dive into that, are there any other questions or concerns about the course or any of the other topics we talked about in our previous time together? Go ahead, Manueli.
Professor, I'm having a hard time to find because I know there's like assignment that it's due to tonight. I think it's the safety lab. I'm having a hard time to find where is it? Is it in the lab one or
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that question, right? Yeah, our lab stuff is a little tricky. So we do have a separate Blackboard site just for lab, but then it's too hard to find things and you're all over the place. We already have too many Blackboard sites. So all of the lab things are actually in our Chem 131 Blackboard site, but they're way at the bottom. So you have to scroll all the way down, almost all the way to the bottom, past chapters 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way past chapter 12. And right there, you'll find a little picture of Beaker the Muppet, and he's our lab mascot. So he is sitting right there, and everything lab is inside of that. So when you click on that Chem 131 lab sort of section or chapter, you'll get a different folder for each week of our lab. So the first week is our safety and orientation. So you'll be able to find the lab manuals, the place to turn in your pre-lab, all that inside there. Okay. All right, Pauline, go ahead.
Um, do you want the pre-lab to be handwritten or is typed okay?
It's okay for this one because there really aren't any there's no calculations or anything in there. But really, anytime we're going to be writing chemical formulas or anything mathematical, handwriting is just easier. It's actually faster than trying to format everything correctly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. Awesome. like I said, with any luck, will actually be in the lab tomorrow. If not, though, we've got some alternative plans, and we have a little, again, because our class is so structured, we have some flexibility because we know where things are. We're not doing it as we go along. It makes it easier for us to move things around. So I am a big, I said, a big fan of communication. So you will hear from me, I won't say 10 times over the next 2 days, but probably a handful of times. So do keep an eye out for that information. All right. Awesome. Other things, anything else? All righty. And let's get ourselves back to where we were. So this is the last section in chapter 0 notes in those slides there. Our last task that really isn't a part of any standard first semester general chemistry course or textbook is how to use your calculator. That's a tool. Your calculator is a tool, and right, we're assuming that everyone knows how to use it, and that's not true, right? Unless you spend all day every day playing with your calculator and calculating things left and right, it's not going to be familiar, right? And in our class, we're using a lot of scientific notation, which we practiced last time, and how to enter that in a calculator correctly, confidently, efficiently. That's a skill. That's a skill. So if you don't have it right now, realize it's something that you can acquire, because it is just a skill. So here are the we'll call them the commandments, right? Sort of the things that really, if we can do all these things, we're going to be in good shape. So bringing your calculator to class every day. Um, we're going to be doing quantitative things. Our by nature, chemistry is quantitative, so we're going to be doing a lot of calculations. And unless you want to do long division or fractions, which I don't think anybody does, um, let's just bring that calculator. It's going to be our tool to do the computations for us. It's not going to do the thinking for us. It's not going to make sense of that answer, but it will do again, the computations, the plussings, the multiplyings, the dividings. We talked about this last time, but your calculator does not have eyes. So some of the errors that occurred during that calculator section of developmental practice 1, some of them I could figure out what the errors were, and the errors usually that you've forgotten that your calculator can't see what you're doing. It can't see that problem that's on your page. So what you entered in, what you told your calculator to do, is not what you meant for it to do. It just follows directions, and we just need to know what those directions are. So how your calculator shows scientific notation, right? That's different for every calculator. So this is why it's kind of frustrating to do this when we're not all together, because it's really easy for me to look at it and show you where that is. So many calculators have, you know what, if you pull out your calculator, you can kind of take a look at it, but the calculator that's got the little picture on our screen there, that is showing the power of 10 as 2 tiny little numbers way over on the right, right? So there's sort of regular size numbers, and then way over on the right, there's 2 little digits that are super tiny. So on our screen right now, it's showing 99 as those 2 little digits. That means 10 times 10 to the 99th power. So that's showing you your powers of 10. So your calculator might show it differently. Your calculator might show an E, the actual letter E, and then 2 digits after it, which are also showing you the power of 10. That little E and then a number. So if it says E04, that means times 10 to the 4th power. Those are the 2 most common ways to show it. The third way is it'll actually say times 10 to the whatever. So that depends on, again, what calculator you have. But get used to looking for it, right? So if you've used your calculator, right, just to kind of figure out how much something costs, or, you know, how long is it going to take to get somewhere, realize that there are powers of 10. We're going to have very big numbers and very small numbers. So let's get used to looking for those digits there. And let's get used to paying attention to whether there's a minus sign there or not, right? Because 10 to the minus 4 power is very different from 10 to the positive 4 power. All right. We'll make sure that we use parentheses when we need to, right? Our goal is to be so efficient that there's going to be times where you don't have to use parentheses, right? It's not wrong to use them, but it's super inefficient. So we want to think about, when do we have to have them? When do we need to tell our calculator, let's keep these things together? Number 5 is my favorite one. And number 5 is probably the one that caused the most errors on DP1 in that section on how to use your calculator. So the EE or the EXP button. So if you look at your calculator, if you've got a scientific calculator, you should have a button on there somewhere that says EE or EXP. Can everybody find that on their calculator? Okay. Yeah. Right. That is the magic button on our calculator. That is the button that is the shorthand for times 10 to a power, right? So we'll be able to use that instead of having to type in times 10 to a power. We won't have to put parentheses. It's going to keep that coefficient, that number that's times 10 to a power, together without having to type in a parentheses. So that's going to keep your calculator doing what you think it's supposed to be doing. Because without that, the calculator is going to interpret that times 10 as a multiply, right? And that may not be what you want it to do. Number 6 is all about efficiency. 6 and 7 are all about efficiencies, right? We don't need to multiply by 1 or divide by 1. That doesn't do anything to our math, right? I think hopefully we all remember that from math. So we don't need to enter in times 1 or divided by 1. So when we see those in our math expressions that we need to calculate, we can just kind of skip over those, right? Now, plussing 1 or minusing 1, that's different, right? Those we will need to include. We don't need to enter in a lot of extra zeros. So for example, 0.13 is the same as 0.13. Your calculator doesn't know the difference. 0.130 is the same to your calculator as 0.13, right? So that's just a little tiny bit of efficiency, but right, when you multiply that over, 30 problems that you're solving, that time all adds up, right? So we want to be efficient, but still be correct. So we're gonna practice some of those things today, how to be efficient without sacrificing accuracy. All right. And lastly, our calculator doesn't do a thing with significant figures. That's our topic for our second half of our class. So we're going to have to do that. Again, remember our calculator, it just does the math. It doesn't do any of the thinking or the applying meaning to our numbers. It strictly works with the numbers. Okay. Have we got our calculators? It's going to be a challenge because, like I said, I can't see them, but please, do your best to ask as many questions as you can, right? We can find a way to talk through any challenges and try and make sure that we can all operate our calculators correctly. Okay, so here is our problem to work with. We're going to do this one together. We're going to go through all the keystrokes together and do this in the most efficient way possible. So as you can see from our problem there, everything is either multiplying or dividing, right? This is a pretty common situation that we'll come across in our coming week here. We're going to be doing a lot of multiplying, right? We will have some adding and subtracting, but mostly multiplying in our first week here. So this is pretty typical. So let's grab our calculators and try and enter this in the most efficient but accurate way possible. All right, so we're gonna go through all the keystrokes slowly but surely. All right. Okay. So step 1 is to enter that first digit. And I like to do it from left to right, so I don't forget any numbers. So we'll enter 39, right? And then we're gonna look at what comes next, right? So we've got 1 divided by 0.027. Okay. I do not need to multiply by that 1, right? So I'm not gonna hit the multiply key. right? I'm going to hit the divide key because what I'm going to do next is divide by 0.027. So I'm going to hit the divide key next because the next digit that I need to account for is in the denominator, right? That means divide by it, right? Again, my calculator can't see that. I have to tell my calculator that, right? And now I'm going to enter in not 0.027, right? My calculator doesn't care about the 0 point at the beginning. I'm just going to enter point, the decimal point, that little button down there, 0.27. Now I can't ignore that 0 there because that makes a difference, right? If I enter 0.27, that's different from 0.027, right? So I have to be efficient, but I can't change, right, the math that I'm supposed to be doing. All right. Now let's look at what comes next. What comes next is 6.00 times 10 to the 23 divided by 1. Okay, I'm not even going to think about that divided by 1. Not important, right? It won't change the numerical result. So I'm not even going to think about the bottom. So my 6.00 times 10 to the 23, that's a number in scientific notation, right? So I'm going to enter that in, but I'm going to enter it in using the keys on my calculator that have to do with powers of 10, with things in scientific notation. All right, so am I multiplying or am I dividing by that 6.00?
Multiplying.
We are multiplying, right? Because it's in the top, it's in the numerator, right? So if a number's in the numerator, we're gonna hit the multiply key. If our number's in the denominator, we're gonna hit the divide key. It really is that simple. All right, so we're gonna hit the multiply key, right? Now I'm gonna have to enter in 6.00 times 10 to the 23rd power, that number in scientific notation, but I'm gonna do it in an efficient way. All right, I'm gonna enter 6, right? So 6 to my calculator is the same as 6.00. Okay? It's not wrong to enter 6.00. It's just not efficient. Okay? You can enter in 6.00 if it makes you feel better. That's fine, right? But remember, you're spending a little extra time pushing those extra buttons. And every time you push a button, the chances of pushing the wrong button, right, go up, right? So the less times you're pressing buttons, the more likely you're going to be accurate, right? So I'm just going to enter 6, but I'm not going to enter times 10 to a power. I'm not going to do that. That's too much work, right? My calculator, mine has an EE button on it. Yours may have an EXP button or a times 10 to the button, right? So I'm going to enter my EE key or my EXP key. And that means that's the same. That one key is the same as times 10 to the, and then we're going to fill in the blank, right? And the blank is what's that power? And my power is 23, right? So I'm going to hit my EE button and then my 23. So you should see, right, those two little digits pop up as wherever your calculator is showing those. It may show it as an E23 or it may show it as just tiny little numbers of 23. I am not going to divide by 1. Right? Again, it's not wrong to divide by 1, but it's pointless, right? All I can do is hit the wrong button, right? And then I have to start over. So let's not even go there. We're just going to hit the equals, right? We're done. We're going to hit the equal key. All right. And if we've all done this correctly, are we all on the edge of our seats to see if we got it right? 8.7 times 10 to the 26th power. How did we do? Give a little thumbs up if we did okay.
On my calculator, the EE function just shows up as a -1.
You have to click second, and then
Yeah, you may have to shift to get to it. Yes.
Yeah, because it's probably in blue, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say if it's the blue one, it's a second function. So it's kind of like you have to use the shift key to get there. You don't have to
Right.
hold the second button. You just have to hit it once, and it's not like the shift where you have to hold the shift. But you're basically going to that second level of functions there. So yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes, some calculators, the EE button isn't on the button. It's the function that happens when you go to the second function.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good. Did that work out for you?
Yes, it did.
Okay, perfect. Okay, again, your calculator showed you way more digits than this, right? This is just the rounded off version. We'll talk about why I rounded it that way instead of just something else. But you should have something close to 8.7, and your power of 10 should be to the 26th power. Okay. Okay, so let's try one that's a little more challenging, right? And it's more challenging for a couple of reasons. It's more challenging because we have that power of 10 without something multiplying it. So we just have 10 to the third there instead of something times 10 to the third. And we also have something in scientific notation in the denominator. This is where the problem comes in. This is the biggest problem in using our calculators correctly. And I will tell you, it is 100% solved by using the EE button. Okay. If you're not using that magical EE or EXP button, you are going to keep making this error and you're going to be off by tens of powers of tens. So you're going to have really wildly different numbers. Your coefficient might match the answer, right? That's shown in the answer key or that your friends get, but your power of 10 is going to be wildly off. So we'll talk about why that is as we go through this problem. Okay. So let's do this one again together, keystroke by keystroke. Right? And let's think about why it's being done a certain way and why some things are left out and why some things can't be left out. Okay. All right. So again, we're going to start at the left and work our way to the right. And we'll just go through this problem as we're going across there. So again, you've got 1.2 times 10 to the minus 4. Right? Whenever we see those things in scientific notation, right, there's almost kind of an implied set of parentheses around them. We want to keep them together, right? And that EE button does exactly that without having to enter in any parentheses at all, right? So let's start with our number that we're given. Okay, so we're going to enter 1.2 and then that EE button, which means times 10 to the, right? And then we're going to fill in the power of 10, right? Which is a minus 4. Now we want to do this correctly. Because what we don't want to do, you don't want to use the subtract key because that's actually going to tell your calculator, hey, how about we subtract now? And that's not what you want to do. You want to show that it's a negative sign. So somewhere on your calculator, on mine, it's way on the bottom. On others, it's kind of in that first column on the left. It looks like plus minus, right? And that's the change sign button. That's going to change the sign of whatever you've entered in from a positive number to a negative or from a negative into a positive, right? It'll reverse the sign. So that's what we want to use, right? So we want to enter 4 and then change the sign of that 4. On some calculators, it does not matter what order you do that in. On some calculators, it does matter, right? So you want to practice with your calculator so you know how your calculator is interpreting those keystrokes and whether it makes a difference, whether you change the sign and then put in the 4 or put in the 4 and then change the sign. Some calculators don't care. Some are very specific. It's whatever's in their programming, right? And it's our job to figure out what their programming is so we can give it the proper directions. All right, so those first two steps are entering in 1.2 times 10 to the minus 4. All right, what comes next? Are we going to multiply or divide?
Multiply.
We're going to multiply, right? Because we can see that 10 to the third is in the numerator. It's in the top part there. So that means we're going to multiply by it. If it were in the bottom, we would divide by it, right? So the next button we're going to push is the multiply key, right? It's going to be our next step. And then we have to enter in 10 to the third. And there are several different ways to do this. I like to treat that, for me, I think the clearest way is to treat that as 1 times 10 to the third and enter it in as a number in scientific notation. That way I'm quite certain that I haven't changed the value of it, right? Because 1 times it doesn't change it. And I can use my magical little EE button, which keeps that power of 10 together with that 1 and keeps it either in the numerator or in the denominator, wherever it needs to stay. So what I usually like to do is enter 1 and then the EE or EXP button, whatever you have, and then the 3 to show us to the third power. If you're very comfortable with powers of 10, you can recognize that 10 to the third is 1,000, and you can just enter times 1,000. That's also probably just as efficient. Okay. But you have to be certain that you know what your powers of 10 are, right? So 10 to the 3 is 1,000, not 10,000, not 100. So you want to be careful with that. Okay. There's a divide by 1, but that's not important, right? If we divide by 1, it's not going to change anything. So let's not bother with it, right? So let's just keep moving along and get to the next set of parentheses. And we have 1 divided by 1.500 times 10 to the 19. All right. So are we going to multiply or divide next to be efficient?
Divide.
We're going to divide, right? We're not going to multiply by that 1. That's silly, right? But our 1.5 times 10 to the 19th is in the denominator, right? So that means we're going to divide by 1.500 times 10 to the 19th, right? So the next thing we're going to hit is the divide key, right? And then now here's what we want. We want to make sure that that 1.500 and the 10 to the 19th stay together in the denominator, right? And one way to do that is we could put parentheses in there, and that is a lot of work and easy to forget. The other way is to enter in that number in scientific notation with the EE or the EXP key. That keeps the 1.500 and the times 10 to the whatever power together, as if there were parentheses without you having to enter them in. So it's very efficient, right? And it, like I said, it keeps those powers of 10 together. All right, so let's enter that in. I'm going to enter in 1.5 because 1.500 and 1.5 to the mathematicians among us, those are the same things, right? It's representing the same value, right? To a chemist, that's representing two very different things. One was measured very well to a lot of decimal places, and one was measured not so well to less decimal places. That's where significant figures are going to come in. That's the difference between them for us as scientists who are measuring things. To a mathematician who's just looking at the numerical value, doesn't matter. And that's what our calculator is. Our calculator is a mathematician. It doesn't think about what meaning those numbers have. Okay? So 1.5, just as good as 1.500. Okay, and then, right, times 10 to a power. So hit that EE button, right? And then what's your power of 10? That's what you'll enter in next. That'll be 19. So here's what will happen if you don't use the EE key. What will happen is that as soon as you enter in 1.5, and then if you enter in times 10 to the power, your calculator will interpret that times as, hey, I'm going to multiply by that. And it's going to put the 10 to the 19th in the numerator where it doesn't belong. Okay? Because again, your calculator can't see that 1.500 times 10 to the 19th stayed together. It hears 1.500 and then it hears multiply. So it says, oh, great, I'm going to put whatever comes after this multiply sign in the numerator. So you'll be off by 38 powers of 10, right? The 19 that it should have been in the bottom plus the 19 that it ended up in the top. So there were a couple of problems on DP1. So take a look back at your work, right? Kind of review that. Where that times 10 to a power was in the denominator, and see if you handled that correctly, if you kept it where it belonged, or if it got separated and you ended up with the right coefficient, but a different power of 10 from the answer key. All right, and at this point we're done and we can hit the equals key. All right, we get 8.0 times 10 to the minus 21. So one habit that's good to develop is, does my answer make sense? Is that what I expected? Right? If we go back and look at that problem, we have something with some small value, 10 to the minus 4, multiplied by 10 to the 3, which is sort of biggish. Those kind of cancel each other out. And then you're dividing by a very big number, something to the 19th power. Right? So we should be expecting a very small number as our answer, right? When we divide by a big number, we're going to end up with a very small number. Okay? We look back at the problem before it. Does this answer make sense? Right? We're multiplying by a huge number, on the top, and dividing by a sort of small number, but not anywhere near as small. So we should have expected a really big answer for that. All right, so the question in the chat box, well, what if I don't use the EE key, but I do use parentheses? And the answer is, then you'll be fine. The question is, are you going to remember to use parentheses every time? And how much time do you want to spend entering parentheses? I would say any time that you invest in learning how to use that EE button on your calculator is going to pay for itself over the course of just this semester, never mind every semester hereafter that you may have to use that calculator for. Gosh, why is my chat box so tiny? It's so tiny, I can't read anything. All right. Okay. All right. Other questions for that? All right. And I know some of you have more proficiency with this and you're probably rolling your eyes or half asleep right now. But again, I'm going to challenge you to work on your efficiency then, right? So you may be functional and you may be accurate, but you might not be efficient. Right? So we can always improve with that. All right.
Professor, I just have a quick question as far as the last question.
Uh-huh.
I just have clarity on why we entered 1 versus the previous question, or like in the same question, not entering the 1 that's on the
So
numerator.
I entered the 1 because I wanted to enter that as a number in scientific notation. And not all calculators, when you hit that EE button by itself without a number input, can handle that. So that's more of a just sort of a way to teach it to folks who have all different kinds of calculators. For some folks, if your calculator will allow it, you could have just hit times and then the EE button to the 3rd power. That also would have worked.
Okay, so just from my understanding of what you just said, it's just basically to get the scientific notation.
It is, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so I entered it so that I could enter it as a number in scientific notation with that form of coefficient and then power of 10. So, but that's why I say practicing with your calculator is the most important thing to do. So yeah, so I feel bad that we aren't doing this together, but we really can't wait and do this when we are together. This is kind of one of those skills that we want to get down now, before we start doing our calculations on hopefully today or Friday. So we'll be able to make sense of them. Yeah. So good. All right, other question. Okay. So if people are not getting those same powers of 10, check that you entered in. If you're off by like 4 powers of 10, check that you entered in the 10 to the minus 4 correctly. That might be it. Right? That we've got those entered in correctly, or that you multiplied by 10 to the 3rd instead of divided by 10 to the 3rd. Those are all things to kind of check and re-input those in. Okay. All right. So let me give you 3 more to work on. All right. I am going to try and make my chat box bigger while you work on these. And then we'll take a look at those answers and see if that produced any more questions, right? Or any more, how do I do that sort of thing? And again, right, the first thing is to work on accuracy, right? And then the second step will be to work on efficiency. Okay. So if we're struggling with accuracy, let's kind of focus on that part there first. Okay. All right. So let's take a couple minutes to do that. Here we go. All right, how are we doing? Give me a thumbs up if you've got them all worked out and are ready to see the answers. Okay. Awesome. All right, so here's the answer to the first one. Right, in this one, there actually were parentheses there to remind you, but sometimes there's not, right? So when you've got a top and a bottom, right, especially when we've got two different kinds of math, realize we have to do the top math first or the bottom math first, right? So we might need some parentheses included in there. So for that one, we had to do those calculations first. I noticed on, again, the work on the developmental practice 1, some of you were sort of doing these sort of one step at a time, right? You would complete sort of the calculations on the top part, right? And get a number and actually write down that number. And then sort of combine it with whatever the next steps were. And again, that's not incorrect. It's just super inefficient. And what happens is you're going to tend to round things off after each step. And you might end up with a very different answer at the end compared to what the answer key is if you're treating it as 5 separate calculations instead of one sort of big calculation. All righty. Here's the second one and the third one, so you can check yourself. So remember, in things like part B or C, where you've just got a whole bunch of different calculations there, so if it's all multiplying and dividing, if that number is in the numerator, we're going to hit multiply. If that number is in the denominator, we're going to hit divide. And then, right, you can just kind of truck through, just kind of walk your way through that equation, moving and hitting the multiply key when your number's in the top and the divide key when your number's in the bottom, ignoring all the ones. Okay. All right, I think we have a couple of questions. Okay, Haley, go ahead.
So in terms of this was a quiz or something along those lines, if I just put 4.8 times 10 to the negative 5, would that still be correct, or you need that 0 on the end?
Okay, so for right now, that is correct. 4.8 is just as fine as 4.80. As a habit, I will put things to the right number of significant figures. We haven't talked about that yet. We will in about 40 minutes. So, or
Okay.
less. So, so the answer is for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, no, it doesn't matter. But once we get through significant figures, it will always matter then afterwards.
Okay, yeah. I was just confused because for some answers I put a 0 and other ones I didn't. And then also I didn't know if we wanted to like round, like for the answer I put like 40.69.3 instead of
Right.
4070. So
Right,
I just wanted to just double check.
but those are the same, right? Right. So 4069.341, blah, 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 whatever it is, right? But when we round it to the right number of significant figures, again, you don't know how to do that yet, but you will in about 20 minutes. That's the same, right? That's the same size or the same value, just represented to more or less digits.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, other question. Any other ones for this? All right, so for part C, right? So again, the way we're going to enter that in with our calculator, if we just have our keystrokes here, is we are just going to enter in. Well, let's see if we can do this. Let's let me put my calculator so we can see that. There's my calculator. Wicked little glare on it there. All right, so part C is 75.0, right? So I'm going to enter in, 75, right? And then there's parentheses, and then it says 1 divided by 55.85. So I'm not going to worry about the 1, but my 55.85 is in the denominator. So that means I'm dividing by it, right? So divided by 55.85. All right, and then what comes next is another set of parentheses. There's a 1 on the top and a 3 on the bottom, right? Again, I'm not multiplying or dividing by 1, so I'm ignoring that part. And my 3 is in the bottom. So what am I going to do? Am I going to hit multiply or divide?
Divide.
We're going to divide, right? Because it's in the bottom, right? So I'll hit my divide, divided by 3, right? And then what comes next is a set of parentheses where there's a number on the top and on the bottom. So for the number on the top, I'm going to hit multiply, right? So there's my multiply key, right? And then I'm going to enter that one in. That's another 10 to the 5th power. It doesn't sort of in scientific notation, but I'm going to enter in 1 and then my EE button. So for me, I've got those 2 little numbers that come up there, right? To the 5th power. So 1 times 10 to the 5th. It's the same as 10 to the 5th. And then in the denominator is an 11. So I'm going to hit divided by 11. All right, now I'm going to get all of those digits, right? And then again, to the right number of significant figures, it's 4,070. Again, if you wrote down 4,069 or 4,069.341581, that's fine for right now. We're going to learn those significant figure rules in just a little bit, and then you'll know why those things were rounded up. Oh, absolutely. Good question. What if I wrote it in scientific notation, right? What if you don't like writing 0.000s? You're like, oh, that's great. You can write it any way you want. That's up to you, right? You can put it in scientific notation or not in scientific notation, right? As long as it's showing the right size and then eventually the right number of significant figures. That's fine. You have powers already. I know it's only been 2 days, but you have powers to decide that. Unless you are specifically told, write this in this form or write it in decimal form, you get to decide. So I'm pretty good, I think, at being able to look at your answer and decide if it's the same, whether the answer is written in scientific notation or not. realize as you're doing your practice portfolios and checking your answers with the ones that are provided, sometimes the answers are going to be the same as yours, but they're going to be in a different form. So work on kind of recognizing that as well. Good questions. Awesome. Okay. So I think actually we are at our first break. All right. So we are at our first little break that we've got planned for today. So before we wander off for a couple minutes and stretch ourselves, put a few notes here to yourself about your math skills, right? Right? How did that calculation work going, right? How did that work for you? What were the buttons on your calculator that you need to practice more with? What are the ones that you've got down, right? Again, put maybe a little note to yourself to go back and review any of the feedback on developmental practice 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording here in just a minute. Let's take 5 minutes to get up and stretch our legs. So we'll be back at 12:53. And then we will work on some qualitative things, and then we'll get back to significant figures. All right.